please welcome to the stage Julie Uhrman.
I have so much to say. My notes are so small. This is going to be a joke. Andy was a very big first supporter, and I want to say thank you. When we told him about our idea, I'm a little emotional, and I'm not actually sure why right now. Give me a second. I love what I do. God. We had this little idea. We wanted to build a video game console that was open. I've talked a lot about it throughout the last year, which was we wanted to build a video game console that allowed creators the freedom to create the experiences that they wanted to create for the platforms that they wanted to create it on. On top of that, we wanted to make it accessible to gamers. We wanted to make it $99. We wanted every single game for you to try to be free so that you can experience new developers, new content creators, and even discover games from publishers that you may never have wanted to lay down $60 for before. So we told Andy this idea. And at first, I think he was blown away by how much money we wanted to raise. We wanted to raise $950,000. At the time, it was the largest ask for any Kickstarter campaign, short of, I think, somebody that wanted to make a music record on the top of the moon for $21 million. But it was the largest at the time, and Andy's first comment was, you're going to kill it. You're going to hit your goal. No question. He had no doubt in his mind, and I was scared shitless. It was about a year ago that we did Kickstarter. And when I got here early, and I spent a little bit of time at the Kickstarter lab downstairs. And I had a mild anxiety attack. For those of you that have done Kickstarter, or thinking about Kickstarter, or for the guys that are sitting downstairs right now, Kickstarter is really hard. We were naive. We had no idea what to expect, thankfully. And for those of you that are doing it now, I absolutely applaud you, because it is difficult. It's difficult sharing your idea with the world when you know that anybody could then take that idea and run with it. It's difficult to share an idea of something that you really want to do and you're passionate about, and you're not really sure how you're going to do it, how long it's going to take, but you make a promise that you're going to do it and you're going to deliver on it. And then when it's over, it's never over. I mean, it's been over a year since we did Kickstarter, and it's still not over for us. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. When we started Kickstarter, I was the only employee. We were moving so fast that we didn't even have a website. And after 30 days, I'm still sort of in awe of what we accomplished. We got the support and the faith and the trust of tens of thousands of people. And I'm fortunate to be here today, and I feel lucky to be here because I want to sort of talk about my experience with Kickstarter, and in so doing, almost talk about why we're here today, and it's really the creators and the developers that brought us here. So what I wanted to do was start and talk about why we decided to do it in the first place. And the reason we started to do it was because we were frustrated. We were frustrated because I was seeing things happen in other industries, but not in the creative industry that I was a part of, which was games. Creativity was really growing. There's a lot more freedom to what creators were able to do, but it just wasn't happening in games. In television, we saw the future happening much more quickly. 35 years after the first cable network was launched, you were starting to see creators having freedom on the television, whether it's Breaking Bad, and I'm behind, so nobody tell me what's going on. Don't tell me. Or Game of Thrones, which I'm also behind on. I love binge television watching. Like, I could go off on that for 20 minutes, too. You know, whether it was this, or Sopranos, or Game of Thrones, the idea that creators had more freedom to build the content they wanted to build. And then there was a lot more distribution channels for you to get that content out to your audience. But for games, we were living by the same rules. And to me, the television was the most alluring screen of any in our lives. It's the screen that really sucks you in. It's what sometimes terrifies you, sometimes excites you, but more importantly, it's what connects us and brings us together. And so I want to talk about a little bit about the rules that weren't changing. In the video game space, especially the console space, rewards flow to the most established brands. So don't get me wrong, I love Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 5, if you've read the press, has absolutely killed it. It did $800 million its first day, did $1 billion in sales in its first 3 days, and it's going to continue to do well. But one thing that's important to note is that it cost over $200 million to make this game. And the reason for this are many. the traditional consoles, the last generation, were really built for people who made a game and put it on a shelf. And if you were going to build a game and put it on a shelf, by the time you made it, put it on a disk, wrapped it, shipped it, put it on a shelf, you're going to want to sell as many of those as you possibly can, which means you're going to put as much into that game as possible. Technology doesn't help much, right? You have to build for 3-core, 64-bit power PCs. It's expensive. You're building for a single platform that doesn't talk to any other platforms. So that means your games have to be deep in length. They have to be visually appealing, incredibly powerful, and in this case, incredibly realistic geographically. I think some of the reasons that the industry hasn't changed is habit, right? There's some unbelievably great downloadable games on consoles, but it's just not the focus of these console companies. And lastly, nobody would argue that there aren't great mobile and PC games out there. There are. They're fantastic. But I still believe the television is the best place to connect you and to enjoy a joint experience with a lot of people. I don't see this changing much for the next generation of consoles either. In fact, I think it's getting worse. The established brands are what are going to sell these consoles. They're incredibly expensive for gamers, right? And that's because they're just not game consoles anymore. These companies want their boxes to be the general entertainment media center in your living room. So they're not just focused on games anymore. So the big budget, the franchises are what they're going to use to anchor these systems and sell them into you. And so I think for the independent game creator, it gets even worse for them. Ouya was brought, I mean, as Andy said at the beginning, Ouya was built really focusing on the independent game creator. We also took funding. We did have somebody join our board who's amazing and wonderful, and he says a lot of times that he sees us as being, the Sundance for video games, right? That we are alternative, we are something different, and I think that's important because we were built so differently with our roots being that of Kickstarter, right? Which is that we built it with you and that we existed only because you wanted us to exist. So the story of Ouya, I think, has been told a lot and is interesting, and I'll talk about it a little bit. But what's much more fascinating to me are the developers. And I think that's why I was so choked up when I got up here, because unlike most of you in this room, I'm not a creator in the sense of I'm being creative. My mother says I'm tone deaf, which means I can't sing or write music. I only dance in clubs. I don't paint. I don't make video games. I don't draw. I don't write. I don't do any of those things. But I love enabling it because I am such a big fan of it. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the developers that are coming to Ouya, and really just the reason that we exist is for them. So I want to start with the amazing team behind this game called The Amazing Frog. Two guys by the name of Gaz and Harry from Feiju, who live in a small town called Swinton in the UK, wanted to build a game about a frog running around a parking lot, which is literally the parking lot they see outside their window. They have been in game development for 15 years, and like most of us, they worked for somebody else where they worked on their pet project that they loved after hours, at night, on the weekends, on their own. And then eventually they decided they loved this so much that they wanted to build it. But it was a challenge for them because the game didn't resonate in the typical ways that you describe games. If you guys have followed our growth, you maybe heard of a game called Towerfall that Matt Thorsen built and brought to Ouya for the first time. And this is sort of your classic combat-style platformer with bows and arrows. It's an incredibly great game that's built well, that just plays really well, and you can define it. But this is much more difficult. How do you describe just a frog running around trying to get as many points as possible by doing crazy tricks? And so once they got close to finishing their game, they didn't know where to take it because nobody really got it. And that's where Ouya played a role, because we got it, because we saw that this was something fun that people wanted to play, and that it's not about how visually appealing it is or how incredibly amazing the game mechanics are. Something that just is fun is worth having in the world. I'm going to read one of my favorite quotes about this game from Chris Priestman at Indie Static. It said, "My friend and I spent 4 years playing this game. It's so amazingly bad in a good way. I would rather play this with friends than Halo. I swear you made this game straight from my soul." And that's the kind of game that needs to be out in this world. Two of our newest creators and people that have now joined the Ouya family are the creators of Clark, Felix and Matt, also known as Golden Tricycle. I love this story. I met them at E3. First of all, they're not game developers. They've never made a game. In fact, they're architects. But they had this idea to build this game about this crazy robot. And they eventually quit their jobs, and then the reality of what it takes to make a game hit them. They were totally overwhelmed by what they didn't know about 3D rendering and game mechanics and all of that. And as they built this game, they wanted it to be played with a controller, and they wanted to see it on a big screen. But they're not an established developer. They don't have publisher relationships, and it's just not the kind of story that gets told nowadays. So we helped them a little bit. They said they found a home, and now 2 years later, the game is live. I have two more. This one is young, not only in game development, but in years. Right? The lead developer at the company, Octograb, is an 8-year-old boy by the name of Noah. He's awesome. He told me the story of how he developed the game. So he was skiing with his father, and he tore his ACL. He was stuck inside the house. He loves playing video games, and his dad said, there's no way you're going to play them all day and night. And he said, all right, fine, I want to make a game. And for him, he was very clear about this. He said, I didn't want to make a game where all of my friends hunched over a tablet or a phone and were trying to play together. He wanted a game that he could show off to all of his friends. So he and his dad came together and built this game, Astronaut Rescue. They built it in time of our June launch at E3, which was they built it in a couple months. And I bring this up not just to give you that really happy kid story that always gets you brownie points, but because he's 8 years old, and the first game he ever made was on a television. Like, how many people can say that? And can you imagine what his second or fifth or even 10th game might be? It's going to blow our minds. But that's because he's creating for the platform he wants to create from the first moment. This is why we exist. This is why it's so awesome. And I'm definitely going to lose it on this next one. For every game where there's an imaginary world, sometimes there's a real world too, and a story that needs to be told. Ryan is a programmer, he's a game developer, and he's a father of 4. I'm a mother of 2, so it's always a hard story. His third child, Joel, who's 4 years old, has cancer. And he wanted to create a game where he could tell the story of his experiences with his son. He wanted the story to be told on the big screen because regardless of how personal and emotional and sensitive the story is, he wanted it to be a shared experience. And that happens on the television. So now you might be asking yourselves, why in the world would he come to Ouya to tell this story? It makes a lot of sense. First of all, we're not the biggest company in the world. We're not the most well-known company in the world. We don't have millions of dollars that are going to, and we're not going to be able to have millions of dollars to spend on marketing and promoting this game to make sure that everyone who needs to hear this story hears the story. In fact, we're the complete opposite. We're a new company. We are a dirty company. We make a ton of mistakes. So let me count the ways. We started delivering our Kickstarter units on time, but we didn't get them all out on time. There were some people 30, 45 days later that still didn't have them. So as much as you try to plan for everything through Kickstarter, there was always something that's going to catch you. And for us, it was shipping. Our early controllers had thumbsticks that didn't work. Our action buttons got stuck underneath our faceplates. Some people said that our Wi-Fi was shoddy and that the controllers were laggy. We did a tweet about this game, and we ended it with, "Get some." Literally, that was a highlight. We launched a matching program for Kickstarter projects. If you wanted to bring your game to Ouya exclusively, we'll match your goal once you hit it. We so did not think about all the different ways that people could take advantage of that kind of program. And I will talk about that a little bit later. We put out a video that had vomiting in it and then wanted you to buy an Ouya. So there was vomit and Ouya in the same ad. That was another highlight. So we have done a lot of things wrong. We've made a lot of mistakes. And I think one thing that's really unique about us is that we're going to continue to make them. Right? We're young, we're strappy, we're moving fast. We're building this product in the open with you. We got our start with you. We get better every day because we listen to you, and some things are going to resonate and some things aren't going to resonate. So going back to that Dragon Cancer, you're all totally wondering why he's bringing that game to us first. And I would say because we didn't think it was risky, because we felt it was a story that needed to be told, no matter how hard it was. In Ryan's own words, he says, "The Ouya presents us with an opportunity to shape the space by bringing our game to a round table that equally values the scrappy upstart with the established publisher. We believe when other developers do the same, and when gamers and non-gamers in a family living room can experience what we're creating, the conversation about what games are and what they can be will expand." For every one of Ryan and Josh, we hope there's hundreds and thousands more. We hope that you build the story that you want to build, and not have to, answer to the man, or in my case, the woman. The reason you bring your game to Ouya, because every Reddit thread, every blog, every article, every email from a Ouya user, we read, we listen, we digest, and we figure out a way to get ourselves better, make ourselves better. We build this in the public, and Kickstarter was our beginning, but we keep doing it as we go. There's a cost to being open. It's difficult. Your successes are reveled as much as your failures are. But we think it's really important. We think it's what makes us better. We started with an idea. We gave it to Yves Behar, and it turned into a bunch of designs. And then we had a prototype. And then we had a couple of units that were made in early backers' hands, and now we have units in a lot of different homes. We learned along the way that there is not much you can plan for. A lot of things that are come up, and what you have to be good at is reacting quickly but thinking first. And that's something that we are still learning, unfortunately. We have learned that no matter what your best intentions are, if you can't figure out how to release it in the right way, it might not work out. So we thought it was amazing to match people's donations on Kickstarter. And we didn't have enough rules around the program, and people took advantage of it out the gate. So having best intentions isn't always the best. But you have to be quick to hear the feedback, no matter how painful it is, and iterate and change as you go. We do things very differently, and not everybody likes the way we do it. In fact, when we showed up at the largest video game conference in the world, E3, the organizers didn't like what we were doing, so they tried to prevent people from finding us by putting a huge semi-truck in front of us. They even called the cops on us. But then when they got tired of fighting us, people found us. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen. People are going to continue to find us. The last day of Kickstarter was sort of our day 2, and we're in our day 2 right now. And I firmly believe that if you remove all the barriers and all of the obstacles for creators, you're going to get something truly amazing that's built out there. And it's not easy. We're not going to have 80 million units in the market anytime soon. And in this last year, I've learned one very important thing, that if you want something to happen, there is nothing more powerful than a large group of people that believe in you. To steal a line from one of my favorite television shows today, we're not the greatest game console in the world, but we could be. It's our job to do the work. It's your job to make and believe. Thank you guys very much.